Joining us now here in Washington, Chief of Staff to Vice President Mike Pence, Marc Short. Marc, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Chris, thanks for having me.
Speaker Pelosi, as we've just heard, says that she won't send over the articles of impeachment until she knows what the ground rules are for a Senate trial, and she wants Democrats to be able to call witnesses. Here she is.
The next thing for us will be when we see the process that is set forth in the Senate, then we'll know the number of managers that we may have to go forward and who we would choose.
Is there anything the White House and Senate Republicans plan to do, or are you just going to wait on Pelosi?
Well, Chris, I think her position is really untenable. The reality is that she said in the House that this president poses such a grave danger to the globe that we have to trample on his constitutional rights, not allow us to have any witnesses in front of the Intelligence Committee, not allow us to have counsel president, not allow us to provide evidence in our own defense. We're going to trample those rights to rush this through, and now we're going to hold it up to demand a longer process in the Senate with more witnesses. I don't know when they became so concerned about due process after trampling over the president's rights. But to your opening segment, I think the president believes that we're winning right now. He believes that we've won on taxes. The economy is booming. Unemployment is at record low. Military spending he's rebuilding.
Okay. I get all of that. And there's plenty of time for the campaign. But answer my question. Is there anything that you can do, or do you just have to wait for Pelosi to...
But Chris, it's not just the campaign. Congressman Al Green said we have to impeach him because
I understand all of that. I'm asking you a specific question. Is there anything you can do to move this trial along, or do you just have to wait for Pelosi to do what she's going to do?
We're quite confident that this position is untenable and she's going to move it along, and that Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell reach a deal on how it's going to proceed in the Senate.
So you think that she'll eventually give in?
She will yield. There's no way she can hold this position.
The president says that he wants his day in court. How frustrated is he right now by what Pelosi is doing? And he's been sort of back and forth in this. Does he want a full trial in which he can call witnesses, Republicans can call witnesses to defend him?
He's frustrated what he found to be an completely unreasonable impeachment. So sure, he's frustrated by that, but he's also anxious to get not just acquitted, but exonerated in the Senate. So he's looking forward to his opportunity to have a fair trial in the Senate.
And does a fair trial mean both sides call witnesses?
I think what's happened in 20 years ago in the Clinton impeachment is that you saw that they agreed to say, let both sides lay out their case, and then we'll take a vote about additional witnesses. That's what they agreed to. And it wasn't just, it was a 100-0 vote on that process, including Chuck Schumer supporting that process. So when Schumer says he wants the same proceedings as what happened in Clinton, I think that's what we welcome too. He's trying to now change the rules and have a whole different process. And Chris, if her case is so airtight that she said that she had to ram it through and it's undeniable, why does she need more witnesses to make her case?
That's a question for Speaker Pelosi. I hope we have her on. What does the president make of Pelosi this week inviting him to deliver his State of the Union address to Congress, a joint session, on February 4th? Does he read that as her acknowledging that her case is going nowhere?
Oh, we think her case is going nowhere, yes. And I think the president looks forward to addressing the whole country on February 4th to talk about how well this country's doing.
And how does he feel about the fact that she invited him this week?
Well, I think it's the same thing, Chris. In the midst of the impeachment, we had 15 to 20 House Democrats over in a black tie event for a Christmas party with the president. It's like, how serious are they really doing this? Or again, is it once again just a political exercise to placate the radical left of their base? That's what we think this has been all along. It's why this was the 7th impeachment vote. It wasn't the first. They've tried 7 times. They had 70 votes for impeachment even before Mueller even testified on the Russia collusion hoax. They've been trying to do this from day one of this administration. And the reality is that they continue to see us racking up victories to the American people, and they know they can't beat them at the ballot box.
On Friday night, President Trump tweeted this headline. We're going to put it up. Russian President Vladimir Putin says U.S. President Donald Trump's impeachment is far-fetched and predicts the U.S. Senate will reject it. That's President Trump retweeting what Putin said about him. At the same time, the White House threatened to veto the big spending bill, which would avoid a government shutdown unless Democrats dropped a provision that would have said the president must release any funding that Congress approves military aid for Ukraine. I know there were separation of power issues there, Congress dictating what the president must do or not do, but does President Trump still believe that it was Ukraine, not Russia, that interfered in the 2016 election?
Chris, it doesn't have to be an either-or. It can be both. But that reporting was, once again, miserable reporting by the Washington Post. We requested $250 million in aid to Ukraine. If Congress did its job and completed their spending bill on September 30th, we would have had it then. It was delayed for over 3 months because they did this sham impeachment. They're the ones actually delaying aid to Ukraine. What our administration said is that they tried to put a special provision there that said there's no executive review on any of this aid, not just Ukraine, but other countries. But ultimately, the aid is in there, and we're going to deliver that aid to Ukraine. So it's actually incredibly misleading and misappropriate reporting by the Washington Post to say that we were issuing a veto threat over aid to Ukraine. It was on the policy riders in which Congress was trying to say, we're taking away the executive branch's ability to review the aid. Any executive would have had concern over that, whether it's Republican or Democrat alike.
And I pointed that out. There were separation of power concerns. But you said it doesn't have to be either or. Forget the question of Russia. Does the president believe that Ukraine interfered in the 2016 election?
He thinks that we should at least investigate it, Chris. I mean, go back to 2016. I know this is inconvenient for a lot of people in the mainstream media, but when Russia interfered in our election, Barack Obama was president and Joe Biden was vice president. And Joe Biden himself said he was in charge of Ukraine policy. And his son is getting between $50,000 and $80,000 a month to serve on a board where he has no experience whatsoever. So his question is, why shouldn't we investigate it? It seemed like we could never get enough investigation of foreign interference in our elections for 3 years. But as soon as the president asked for it, it's like, hey, we must impeach him.
What? Well, that's not why it happened, as you know. I mean, there was a phone call and there was a question of conditionality of a White House visit and giving the military aid, and that it was on that basis that he was asking for the investigation. But let me take your point. Let me take your point. You say, well, we should still investigate. Every major U.S. intelligence agency says it was Russia that interfered in the election. During the House Intel Committee hearings, a member of the Trump, let me just finish, a member of the Trump National Security Council, Fiona Hill, said this idea that Ukraine interfered in the election is Kremlin disinformation. So why does the president think it's still worth investigating whether Ukraine did something?
Why don't we run to try and find the bottom line and the answers? We're not questioning Russia's interference, Chris. I'm accepting that. But it doesn't mean that just because Russia interfered, it doesn't mean others didn't as well.
Well, but they're saying, in Fiona Hill, that the whole question of Ukraine is Russian disinformation. And in fact, according to reporting, you may say it was inaccurate, Putin, supposedly in a meeting they had in Germany, told the president that it was Ukraine, and he apparently said to some people in the administration, Putin told me it's Ukraine.
I've read that again, reporting in the Washington Post. I never heard that. I believe that there can be, just because you're saying, you know, my house was robbed last night means your house couldn't have been robbed last night. It's quite possible that both were interfering in elections, and why not investigate that?
Okay, let's turn to a new subject. An evangelical magazine, Christianity Today, ran an editorial this week under a headline, and there you can see it, Trump should be removed from office. It said, that he should be removed, we believe, is not a matter of partisan loyalties, but loyalty to the creator of the Ten Commandments. Here is editor Marc, who wrote that.
The question is, when does his behavior, which is described as immoral accurately, rise to the level where he's no longer fit to serve office? And to me, we cross that line with the impeachment hearings.
Now, your boss, Vice President Pence, is an evangelical. How does he feel about President Trump being called by Christianity Today a, quote, leader of such grossly immoral character?
Well, I don't want to put words in Vice President's mouth, but Chris, I think for a lot of us who are celebrating the birth of our Savior this week, the way that we look at it is that this president has helped to save thousands of similar unplanned pregnancies. This president has helped to make sure that religious liberty is protected. This president has done more. As we celebrate today in our churches across this country this morning, they're singing O Little Town of Bethlehem. There's been no president who's been a greater ally to Israel than this president. So for many of us who are Christian, we look at this and say, I am thankful that Donald Trump is president, and I'm thankful that Mike Pence is vice president.
You talk about morality and character finally, I want to ask you about the president's comments in Michigan this week, where he suggested that the late Congressman John Dingell might be in hell looking up rather than in heaven looking down. Here is the reaction of Dingell's wife, Debbie, to the president's comments.
I loved my husband very much. I'm still having a hard time. He was my partner and the love of my life. And so I was already having a hard time with this holiday. And the comment that he made was just, it made me sad.
How do you explain the president making a comment that hurt her so deeply? You talk about Christmas. This will be her first Christmas in 38 years without her husband. And why won't he apologize?
Chris, I'm sorry that she's hurting, and I'm sorry, and I certainly, hope that, wish her the best as she deals with her circumstances. I think that our administration respects the service of John Dingell in service. We respect in uniform. We respect his service to our country in Congress, and we respect her service to our country and her following her husband in Congress. I think that. I'm sorry that she's in this circumstance today, but in light of where we were on, what was it, Wednesday night, I think the president is saying, John Dingell was not exactly a wallflower. John Dingell recalled to the president imbecile in his closing months. John Dingell himself, as well, had a lot of critical comments about the president, yet he took time to call Debbie Dingell to express his personal condolences at the passing. He lowered flags to half-mast. I think at the time and the moment, the president is feeling that, that in midst of an impeachment vote, that was something that came up in his rally speech.
Marc, thank you.